They stole his home and left him to disappear. But what he built in the middle of nowhere made them wish they never did. At 67, Ethan Cole thought surviving war was the hardest thing he'd ever face, until the people he trusted most erased him from his own life. With nothing left but an old truck and a loyal German shepherd named Atlas, he drove into a place no one wanted, a land people called dead. But what he found there, and what his dog uncovered beneath it, would change everything. Not just for him, but for others who had nowhere left to go. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's here with us. The sun was sinking behind the mountains when Ethan Cole turned onto Maple Ridge Drive, the road he had driven for over 40 years, without ever needing to think about it. The tires of his old pickup crunched against the gravel, in a way that felt familiar, grounding, like muscle memory. For a moment, just a moment, everything felt normal. Then he saw the driveway. Empty. Ethan slowed, his hand tightening around the steering wheel. Something in his chest shifted, a quiet instinct, honed from years in the desert. The kind that whispered before danger showed its face. His house sat at the end of the lane just as it always had. Same white siding, same porch railing he had fixed with his own hands 2 summers ago. But something was wrong. There was no porch swing. Ethan frowned, pulling the truck to a stop. The engine idled, humming low beneath him. But the silence around the house was too loud. No wind chimes, no rustle of the oak tree, no light in the windows. "Stay," he muttered. Atlas, the German shepherd in the passenger seat, didn't move. The dog's amber eyes were fixed on the house, ears forward, body tense. Ethan stepped out slowly. The cold evening air brushed against his face, carrying a scent he didn't recognize. Not home. Not anymore. He walked toward the front door, each step heavier than the last. The porch creaked under his weight. The door was unlocked. That was the second thing wrong. Ethan pushed it open. The world inside was gone. No couch, no rug, no photographs lining the wall. The place where his wife used to sit with her knitting, empty. The kitchen table where they had eaten every morning for decades, gone. Cabinets open, stripped clean. Even the clock above the stove had been taken, leaving a pale square of untouched paint behind. Ethan didn't move, and his brain refused to process what his eyes were telling him. He stepped inside, boots echoing against bare hardwood. "Hello," he called out, his voice hollow in the empty space. Nothing answered. He moved from room to room faster now. Bedroom, bathroom, closet. Every door opened to the same thing. Nothing. Not even the small things. Not the books, not the framed medals, not the box in the closet he hadn't opened in years because it held memories he wasn't ready to face. Gone. All of it. A ringing started in his ears. No. This isn't right. His breathing shortened, chest tightening, vision narrowing as if the walls themselves were closing in. He reached for the counter, gripping it hard. This is wrong. This is wrong. A sound snapped him back. A low, steady whine. Atlas stood in the doorway watching him. Yet Ethan turned toward the dog, blinking rapidly as if waking from a dream. "They must have moved things," he muttered. "Temporary. That's all. They said they were organizing." But even as he spoke, he knew. He reached into his jacket pocket, fingers trembling, and pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over his son's number for a long second before pressing call. It rang once, twice, then clicked. "Dad." Robert's voice came through, casual, almost impatient. Ethan swallowed. "What? What happened to the house?" There was a pause. Not long, just long enough. Oh, Robert said. Yeah, I figured you'd see it today. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. See what? The sale, Robert replied. We closed this morning. The word didn't make sense. Sale? Ethan repeated. Yeah, the house, Dad. We sold it. Got a great offer. Oh, actually, way above asking. Ethan's knees weakened. He leaned harder against the counter. You sold it, he said slowly, like the words themselves might break. Well, yeah, Robert continued, his tone shifting into something rehearsed. We talked about this. You remember the power of attorney? Ethan's mind flashed back. Papers on the table, his daughter's voice gentle, reassuring. Just in case something happens, Dad. It's only for emergencies. His stomach dropped. That wasn't Ethan started, but his voice cracked. That wasn't for this. Legally, it covers it, Robert said. And honestly, Dad, it's for the best. That house was too much for you. It's not safe. Ethan stared at the empty walls. My home? He whispered. We've got you set up. Robert went on. There's a great assisted living place. Clean, modern, a full medical staff. You'll be comfortable. Ethan closed his eyes. Comfortable. 40 years. Gone in a sentence. What about my things? He asked quietly. We handled that, Robert replied. Sold most of it through an estate service. Donated some. You don't need all that clutter. Clutter? Ethan's chest tightened again, sharper this time, like something tearing. That was my life, he said. Another pause. Dad, Robert sighed. You're not being rational. This is what's best for everyone. Everyone. Ethan opened his eyes. The room was still empty. Still, not his. Where am I supposed to go? He asked. Well, Robert said, we assumed you'd go to the facility. But if you've got something else in mind, that's fine too. We've already finalized everything. Finalized? Ethan let out a slow breath. That something inside him, something that had held steady through war, through loss, through years of quiet endurance, shifted. Yeah, he said, voice low. I've got somewhere. Good, Robert replied quickly. That makes things easier. Ethan didn't answer. He ended the call. The silence that followed was heavier than anything he had ever carried. For a long moment, he just stood there. Then slowly, he turned. Atlas was still in the doorway, waiting, watching. Ethan walked past him, out of the house, down the steps, back toward the truck. He didn't look back, not once. The sun had dropped lower now, casting long shadows across the yard that no longer belonged to him. The sky burned orange and red, like the edge of something ending. He opened the truck door. Atlas jumped in without being told. Ethan sat behind the wheel, his hands resting on the wheel, unmoving. His reflection stared back at him from the windshield. Older than he remembered. Eyes hollow, in a way that felt too familiar. For a second, just a second, the world shifted. The driveway blurred. The air changed. Dust, heat. The distant echo of something that wasn't there anymore. Ethan's breath hitched. No, not here. Not now. His hands began to shake. The sound of his own heartbeat filled his ears. Loud. Overwhelming. The edges of his vision darkened as the past pressed in. Uninvited. And merciless. Then came a weight warm, solid, real. Atlas had leaned across the seat, pressing his head firmly against Ethan's chest, grounding him, pulling him back. Ethan gasped, the world snapping into place. The mountains returned, the cold air, the empty house behind him. He let out a shaky breath, and his hand rising slowly to rest on the dog's head. "Yeah," he whispered. "I'm here." Atlas didn't move. Didn't need to. Ethan swallowed hard, then turned the key. The engine roared to life. For the first time in 40 years, Ethan Cole drove away from his home, with nothing but a truck, a dog, and the pieces of a life that no longer existed. The road stretched ahead, dark and uncertain, but Atlas stayed beside him, and that was enough to keep going for now. The road ahead curved into darkness, swallowed by the rising hills as night crept over the mountains. Ethan kept both hands locked on the steering wheel, knuckles pale under the dim glow of the dashboard lights. The world outside narrowed into two thin beams of headlights, cutting through the black. He didn't know where he was going. Not really. Just away. Atlas shifted beside him, settling deeper into the worn passenger seat. But his eyes never left Ethan. The dog watched him the way soldiers used to watch each other. Silent, alert, ready. Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to steady his breathing. "Colorado," he muttered under his breath. "We're going to Colorado." It sounded distant, unreal. The word echoed in his mind, like something remembered from another life, his father's land. A place no one had wanted. A place no one had ever stayed long. Ethan hadn't been there in over 20 years, maybe more. He pressed harder on the gas. The truck responded with a low growl, climbing steadily as the road angled upward. The air grew colder the farther he drove, frost beginning to creep along the edges of the windshield. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes, and time didn't feel right anymore. The hum of the engine, the endless dark, the quiet weight of everything he had just lost, it all blended together into something heavy and unreal. And then, a flash, bright, blinding. Ethan flinched. The road vanished. Heat slammed into him like a wall. Sand. Smoke, the distant crack of something he knew too well. His breath hitched. Not here. Not now. His hands tightened on the wheel as the memory surged forward, uninvited and violent. A convoy. The sound of tires grinding against gravel. A voice shouting over the radio. The sudden, deafening blast that turned everything into chaos. Ethan's vision tunneled. The headlights blurred into streaks of white. His foot pressed harder on the gas, without him realizing. The truck began to drift. "Ethan." The voice wasn't real. It never was. "Ethan, stay with me." A sharp movement. Warm, wet, Atlas. The dog lunged forward, planting both front paws against Ethan's chest, his tongue pressing hard against Ethan's face. The sudden contact broke through the noise. Ethan gasped, the world snapping back into place with a jolt. The road reappeared. The truck veered dangerously close to the edge of the shoulder. Ethan yanked the wheel, tires screeching, as he corrected course just in time. The truck swerved, then steadied. Silence, heavy, breathing hard. Ethan pulled his foot off the gas and eased the truck onto the side of the road. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as he came to a stop. For a long moment, he didn't move. His chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath sharp and uneven. Atlas stayed where he was, front paws still pressed against Ethan, eyes locked onto his. "Hey," Ethan whispered hoarsely. "Hey, I'm okay." But his voice didn't sound convincing. The dog didn't back away, didn't relax. Ethan swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he reached up and rested them against Atlas's shoulders. Yeah, he said softly. You got me. Slowly, Atlas lowered himself back into the seat, but he didn't look away. Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes for a second. Just a second. The darkness behind his eyelids wasn't empty. It never was. But this time, it didn't pull him under. Not completely. He opened his eyes again, staring out at the empty stretch of road ahead. I thought I was past that, he murmured. Atlas let out a quiet huff. Ethan almost smiled. Ah, guess not. The cold air seeped into the truck, biting through his jacket. He rubbed his hands together while trying to shake off the lingering tremor. He couldn't afford to lose control out here. Not now. Not anymore. After a while, he reached forward and turned the key again. The engine rumbled back to life. All right, he said quietly. We keep moving. The truck rolled forward, merging back onto the road. The mountains rose higher now, their dark outlines cutting against the night sky. The farther he drove, the more the world seemed to empty out. Fewer lights, fewer signs, just long stretches of road, and the quiet weight of the wilderness pressing in from all sides. Ethan's eyes stayed fixed ahead, but his mind drifted. The house, the empty walls, the sound of Robert's voice, calm and certain, like everything, had been decided long before Ethan even knew it was happening. We sold it. The words replayed over and over, much like a loop he couldn't shut off. Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel. 40 years, he said under his breath. 40 years, and it was that easy. Atlas shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing against Ethan's arm. Ethan glanced at him. Guess it's just us now, huh? The dog's ears flicked. That was enough of an answer. The road began to climb more steeply as the hours passed. Snow appeared in patches along the sides, glinting faintly under the headlights. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the sky, Ethan's eyes burned with exhaustion. But he didn't stop. Couldn't. Not yet. When the sun finally rose pale and cold over the mountains, the landscape around him had changed completely. The trees grew thinner. The land stretched wider, empty, wild. Ethan slowed the truck as a narrow dirt road came into view on the right. Faded, barely marked. He almost missed it, but something in him recognized it anyway. He turned the wheel. The truck bumped onto the dirt path, tires kicking up dust and loose gravel as it climbed slowly upward. The road twisted through the hills, narrowing as it went, branches scraping lightly against the sides of the truck. Ethan leaned forward slightly, eyes scanning the terrain. And then he saw it. The cabin, or what was left of it. It stood crooked against the slope, weathered wood, darkened by time and neglect. The roof sagged in the middle, one side partially collapsed. The windows were broken, jagged edges catching the early light. The land around it was bare, cold, still, no signs of life. Ethan brought the truck to a stop a few yards away. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. For a long moment, neither he nor Atlas moved. This is it, Ethan said quietly. The words felt heavier than he expected. Atlas stepped out first, jumping down onto the frozen ground. He stood still for a second, nose lifted, taking in the scent of the place. Then he moved slow, deliberate, circling the cabin, checking. Ethan watched him. A strange sense of familiarity settling in his chest, clearing a perimeter, the way they used to. He stepped out of the truck, boots crunching against the frost-covered earth. The cold hit him immediately, sharper than before, biting through layers that suddenly didn't feel thick enough. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself, and walked toward the cabin. Up close, it looked worse. The door hung slightly off its hinges. The wood was splintered, worn thin by years of weather. The inside was dark, empty, just like the house. Ethan stopped at the threshold. For a second, doubt crept in. What am I doing here? But there was nowhere else to go. He stepped inside. The floor creaked under his weight. Dust hung in the air, catching the morning light that filtered through the broken windows. No furniture, no warmth, no comfort, just space. Cold, empty space. Ethan exhaled slowly. Yeah, he murmured. This will do. Behind him, Atlas stepped into the cabin and sat down near the doorway, watching him. Ethan turned, meeting the dog's gaze. A faint, tired smile touched his face. We've been in worse places, he said. Atlas's tail gave a small, steady wag. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling softly through the trees. Ethan looked around the cabin again, then nodded to himself. All right, he said quietly. We start here. And for the first time since he had been thrown out of his own life, the word start didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something else, something uncertain, but possible. The word lingered in Ethan's mind as he stood in the center of the cabin, staring at the broken walls and the light leaking in through gaps that shouldn't have been there. Possible. He let out a slow breath that turned into a faint cloud in the cold air. Yeah, he said under his breath. We'll see. The silence answered him, not peaceful silence, not the kind that settles gently. This was a hollow silence, wide, empty, stretching too far in every direction. It pressed against his ears, against his chest, and until it felt like the whole place was holding its breath, Atlas moved first. The dog padded across the warped floor, nose low, sniffing along the edges of the room. He paused at a dark corner, where the wall had split slightly from the foundation, then moved on, circling again, checking, always checking. Ethan watched him for a moment, then turned slowly, taking in the space. The cabin was worse than he remembered, or maybe he had just forgotten. The roof sagged in the middle, and he could see daylight through a long crack running across the beams. One side of the floor dipped slightly, uneven from years of shifting ground. The old stone fireplace was still standing, but blackened, unused for who knew how long. No furniture, no supplies, nothing. Just bones. Ethan stepped toward the fireplace and crouched, brushing his hand against the cold stone. Dust came away on his fingers. This place hasn't been touched in years, he murmured. Atlas gave a low huff behind him. Yeah, Ethan said, nodding. I noticed. He stood again, joint stiff, and walked toward the back of the cabin. The door there hung crooked, barely attached to its hinges. He pushed it open carefully. Outside, the land stretched wide and unforgiving. Low hills rolled out in every direction, covered in dry brush and patches of snow that hadn't melted. The trees were sparse, thin, twisted things that leaned with the wind. No fences, no signs of recent life, just land, cold, empty, still. Ethan stepped out onto the uneven ground, boots crunching lightly. The wind cut through him immediately, sharper up here, and carrying the kind of cold that didn't care how prepared you thought you were. He pulled his jacket tighter and looked out over the property. This is it, he said quietly. Atlas came up beside him, sitting at his side like he always had. For a long moment, they both just looked. Ethan tried to remember what this place used to be. He had come here as a boy, once, maybe twice, summers that felt longer than they really were. His father walking ahead of him, pointing out things he hadn't understood back then. Land doesn't lie, his father had said once. It gives you exactly what you're willing to work for. Ethan had nodded, not really listening. Now the words came back with a weight he couldn't ignore. He let out a breath. Well, he muttered, guess we're about to find out. Atlas stood suddenly, ears sharp, and Ethan noticed the shift immediately. What is it? The dog turned his head slightly, scanning the tree line. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing. Just wind, moving through branches. But Atlas didn't relax. Ethan felt it then. That quiet tension again. The kind that sat just beneath the surface. Waiting. He straightened slightly, instincts waking up before his thoughts could catch up. You hear something? He asked softly. Atlas took a few steps forward, nose lifted. Ethan listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, a faint sound. Distant. A rustle. Not wind. Something moving. Ethan's body stiffened. He scanned the trees again, slower this time. There, a flicker of movement between the branches. Small. Quick. Gone. As soon as he saw it, Ethan exhaled slowly. Probably just wildlife, he said, more to himself than to the dog. Atlas didn't seem convinced. Ethan watched the tree line for another second, then shook his head. Doesn't matter, he said. We're not exactly in their territory. We're in everything's territory. Atlas glanced back at him. That earned the smallest hint of a smile. Yeah, Ethan added. Yours too. The dog's tail gave a short, steady wag. Ethan turned back toward the cabin. All right, he said, clapping his hands once. The sound sharp in the open air. We need to figure this out before night hits. He stepped inside again, already scanning the space differently now. Not as something broken, but as something to work with. The fireplace. That was first. If he could get a fire going, he could survive the night. Everything else came after. He moved to the corner, pushing aside loose debris and gathering what little dry wood he could find from broken boards and old scraps left behind. It wasn't much. Not enough. He paused, glancing toward the door. Stay, he said. Atlas didn't argue. Ethan stepped outside again, moving quickly now, scanning the ground for anything usable. Fallen branches, dry brush, anything that would burn. The cold bit harder as the sun climbed higher. The kind of deceptive daylight that looked warm but offered nothing. He worked in silence, gathering what he could, arms filling slowly with rough, uneven pieces of wood. Every sound felt louder here, every movement sharper. The wind, the distant rustle. Again. Ethan glanced up. Atlas stood at the doorway, watching him. Always watching. Ethan nodded once. I see you, he muttered. He brought the wood inside, dropping it near the fireplace, and his hands were already starting to stiffen from the cold. All right, he said quietly. Let's see if we remember how to do this. It took longer than it should have. His fingers didn't move the way they used to. The lighter flicked once, twice. The flame caught briefly, then died. Ethan clenched his jaw. Come on, he muttered. Atlas stepped closer, sitting just behind him, waiting. The third try caught a small flame. Weak, but alive. Ethan leaned in carefully, feeding it, coaxing it, shielding it from the drafts that slipped through the broken walls. Slowly, it grew. The fire crackled softly, pushing back the cold just a little. Ethan sat back, exhaling. There we go, he said. Atlas shifted closer, the warmth reflecting faintly in his eyes. Ethan stared at the fire for the first time since he'd arrived. The silence felt different. Still empty. Still heavy. But not as sharp. Not as cutting. He leaned back against the wall, pulling his jacket tighter around him. "This place," he said after a moment, voice low. "They called it Deadland." Atlas tilted his head slightly. Ethan huffed a quiet breath. "Yeah, I remember that." He looked around again. The broken walls, the sagging roof, the fire barely holding on. Then he looked at Atlas. The dog sat steady, calm, present, alive. Ethan nodded slowly. "Well," he said, "it's not dead yet." Outside, the wind picked up again, sweeping across the hills, carrying that same distant rustle through the trees. Ethan heard it. So did Atlas. The dog's ears lifted again, eyes narrowing toward the door. Ethan followed his gaze. The land stretched out, quiet and still, but not empty. No, not really. Ethan leaned forward slightly, the old instinct settling back into place. Watching, listening, waiting. "Yeah," he murmured. "This place isn't dead." He paused, then added softer. "It's just waiting." The fire cracked quietly behind him. The wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere out there, beyond the edges of what he could see, something moved. Ethan didn't take his eyes off the tree line. The wind shifted again, carrying a faint rustle that came and went like a whisper, not loud enough to name, not clear enough to understand, but enough to keep him still. Atlas stood now, no longer sitting by the fire. His body had gone rigid, ears forward, gaze locked into the distance. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. "All right," he murmured. "We're not alone out here." The words didn't feel like fear. They felt like fact. He stood, moving toward the door without turning his back on the trees. Old habits came back quickly. Angles, sight lines, distance. He stepped just outside the cabin, boots pressing into the frozen ground. The air had grown colder. The sun was already dipping lower, dragging shadows long across the hills. Daylight out here didn't last the way it did in the city. It slipped away faster, like it didn't want to stay. Ethan scanned the horizon again. Nothing, just the land. Still, quiet, watching. He stood there for a few more seconds, waiting for another movement, another sign. It didn't come. Atlas gave a low rumble beside him. Ethan glanced down. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We'll keep watch." He stepped back inside and pulled the door as closed as it would go, wedging it slightly with a broken piece of wood, to keep it from swinging open in the wind. Not secure, but something. The fire crackled behind him, a small, stubborn source of heat fighting against the cold that seeped through every crack in the walls. Ethan crouched beside it again, feeding it another piece of wood. "Night's coming," he said under his breath. "We need to be ready." Atlas paced once around the cabin, then settled near the door, positioning himself where he could see both Ethan and the outside. Guarding. Ethan watched him for a moment. "You always pick the right spot," he muttered. Atlas's tail tapped lightly against the floor. Ethan leaned back against the wall again, letting the warmth from the fire reach him as best it could. But it wasn't enough. The cold crept in anyway, through the floor, through the walls, through him. He rubbed his hands together, trying to bring feeling back into his fingers. "Should have grabbed more supplies," he said quietly. But there hadn't been time. There hadn't been anything. Sizz. He closed his eyes for just a moment, just to rest them. The fire crackled. The wind whispered. Atlas shifted, slightly, and then a sound. Sharp, close. Ethan's eyes snapped open. The cabin disappeared. The fire turned into something else. Flashes, noise, a blast echoing through his skull. His breath caught in his throat as the past slammed into him without warning. He wasn't in the cabin anymore. He was back there. Heat, smoke, the smell of dust and metal, and a voice shouting his name. Cole, get down. Ethan flinched violently, his hand reaching instinctively for something that wasn't there. His heart pounded loud and fast, drowning out everything else. The walls felt too close, the air too thick. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't. A sudden force hit his chest. Warm, solid, real. Atlas. The dog barked once, sharp, commanding, and pressed his body against Ethan, breaking the spiral before it could drag him under completely. Ethan gasped, the cabin snapping back into place around him. The fire, the broken walls, the cold. He sucked in a breath, then another, his hands shaking as he reached out and grabbed onto Atlas's fur. "I'm here," he whispered hoarsely. "I'm here." Atlas didn't move, didn't pull away. He stayed pressed against Ethan, steady and unmoving, until Ethan's breathing slowed. It took time, more than Ethan wanted to admit. But eventually, the pounding in his chest eased. The world settled. Ethan leaned his forehead briefly against Atlas's head. "Good dog," he murmured. "Good dog." Atlas huffed softly. Ethan let out a weak breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Yeah," he said. "You keep me in one piece." The words hung there for a second, then faded. The cold returned, stronger now. The light outside had dimmed, shadows swallowing what little warmth the day had offered. Night was coming fast. Ethan pushed himself up slowly, forcing his body to move despite the stiffness settling into his joints. "All right," he said quietly. "We're not done yet." He moved around the cabin, checking what little there was to check. The door barely holding, but the windows open to the elements. The roof questionable at best. He grabbed what scraps of wood he could find and propped them against the worst of the gaps, trying to block some of the wind. It helped a little, not enough, but something. Atlas followed him with his eyes tracking every movement. When Ethan finished, he returned to the fire, adding another piece of wood. The flames flickered higher, casting long shadows against the walls. For a moment, the cabin almost felt alive. Then the wind howled louder this time, stronger. It pushed against the walls, slipping through every crack, carrying with it the kind of cold that didn't just touch the skin. It sank deeper. Ethan sat down again, pulling his jacket tighter around him. "This is going to be a long night," he said. Atlas moved closer, pressing against his side, sharing warmth. Ethan rested his hand on the dog's back. Outside, the sound came again. That rustle closer now. Ethan's head turned slowly toward the door. Atlas was already watching it, both of them still listening. The sound moved along the edge of the cabin, slow, measured. Ethan's breathing steadied, his body shifting instinctively, preparing without thinking. Not panic. Not this time. Focus. He reached for a piece of wood from the fire pile, gripping it tight. Not much, but enough. The sound stopped. Silence fell again. Thick, heavy. Ethan didn't move. Seconds passed, maybe longer then. A faint shape crossed the doorway. "Quick!" Gone in an instant. Ethan's grip tightened. Atlas let out a low growl. Neither of them chased it. Neither of them spoke. They just waited. The fire crackled behind them, but the wind pressed against the walls, and the land outside watched. After a long time, the sound didn't return. The night settled in fully, wrapping the cabin in darkness. Ethan slowly lowered the piece of wood in his hand. Wildlife, he said quietly. Just wildlife. Atlas didn't argue, but he didn't relax either. Ethan leaned back against the wall, eyes still on the door. The fire flickered. The cold lingered, but something had changed. He wasn't just surviving the cold anymore. He was aware, alert, present, alive. He glanced down at Atlas. The dog met his gaze without hesitation. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah," he said softly. "We'll get through it." Outside, the wind carried one last whisper through the trees. Inside, the fire held. Yet for the first time since he had been thrown out of everything he knew, Ethan didn't feel completely lost. Just on edge, waiting, and still here. Morning came slow and gray. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep. One moment he had been sitting against the wall, staring at the door, listening to every shift of the wind, and the next, pale light was seeping through the cracks in the cabin. The fire had burned down to embers. The cold had settled deep into his bones. He opened his eyes carefully, as if the world might still be unstable. It wasn't. The cabin stood the same, broken, quiet, holding together just enough. Atlas was awake. Of course, he was. The dog sat near the doorway again, posture alert, eyes scanning outside like he had never stopped. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Morning," he said, voice rough. Atlas glanced back, tail giving a small, steady wag. Ethan pushed himself up, wincing slightly as stiffness pulled through his joints. Every movement reminded him how long it had been since he'd lived like this, since he'd needed to. He stepped outside. The air hit him harder than the night had. Colder, sharper. The ground was coated in a thin layer of frost, crunching under his boots. The mountains stretched out under a pale sky, quiet and unforgiving. Ethan took a long breath. It burned his lungs. "All right," he muttered. Day 1. Atlas moved ahead of him, already circling the cabin again. Checking. Always checking. Ethan watched him for a moment, then started moving himself, scanning the land with new purpose. He needed water, more wood, something to eat. The list formed quickly in his mind. The same way it used to. Was priorities. Survive first, think later. He walked the perimeter slowly, eyes sharp, noting every slope, every patch of ground that looked different. That's when Atlas stopped. Not just paused, stopped, rigid, focused. Ethan noticed immediately. "What is it?" Atlas didn't look back. Instead, he stepped forward, nose low, then started digging. Fast, aggressive. Dirt and frost flew behind him as his paws tore into the ground with a kind of urgency Ethan hadn't seen before. Ethan frowned. "Hey." Atlas didn't stop. "Atlas." Nothing. The dog kept digging deeper now, ignoring everything else. Ethan stepped closer, watching. "Hey, easy." He crouched slightly, studying the spot. It didn't look different. Oh, just a patch of ground behind the cabin. Slightly uneven, maybe. Hard to tell. Probably a burrow, Ethan said under his breath. Something living under there. Atlas dug harder. A low, frustrated sound escaped him, as if whatever he was after wasn't coming fast enough. Ethan's eyes narrowed. This wasn't hunting behavior. This was something else. "All right," he said slowly. "Let's see what you've got." He moved closer, brushing aside some of the loose dirt Atlas had thrown back. Then, a sound. Dull metal. Ethan froze. Atlas stopped for just a second, then resumed digging with renewed intensity. Ethan's pulse picked up. "No way," he whispered. He dropped to one knee and started clearing the dirt with his hands, working alongside the dog now. Cold soil scraped against his fingers. More of the surface revealed itself. Flat, solid, not rock. Metal. Ethan brushed away more dirt and exposing the edge of something buried. A hatch. Old. Weathered. But unmistakable. His breath caught. Atlas backed up slightly, watching him now. Chest rising. And falling. Ethan stared at the metal plate, his mind racing. What the hell? He wiped his hands on his jacket, then reached down and tested the edge. It didn't move, locked, or stuck. Ethan leaned back slightly, scanning around. There, a rusted handle half buried under the dirt. He cleared it off, fingers working faster now despite the cold. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see." He gripped the handle and pulled. Nothing. He adjusted his stance, bracing his foot against the ground, and pulled harder. The metal groaned faintly, but didn't give. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Come on." Atlas stepped closer again, watching. Ethan set his jaw and pulled once more. And this time, with everything he had. The hatch jerked, then shifted. A low, grinding sound echoed as the seal broke after years, maybe decades, of being untouched. Ethan stumbled back slightly as the hatch lifted just enough to let a rush of cold, stale air escape from below. He stared down at it. Darkness. Deep. Endless. Atlas moved forward, peering into the opening. Ethan let out a slow breath. "No one told me about this," he said quietly. His father never mentioned it. Or maybe he had, and Ethan just hadn't been listening. He knelt again, pushing the hatch open wider. It creaked loudly, resisting, but eventually gave way. The opening revealed a narrow set of metal steps leading down into the earth. Ethan hesitated. The air coming from below was different, still sealed, untouched. He glanced at Atlas. The dog looked back at him. "No fear. Just focus." Ethan nodded once. "All right," he said softly. "We check it out." He reached into his truck for the small flashlight he kept in the glove compartment, then returned to the opening. The beam cut through the darkness as he shined it down. Concrete walls, old but intact. The steps descended about 10 feet, then opened into something larger. A room. Maybe more. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. "This isn't just a hole," he murmured. Atlas stepped closer to the edge, then looked back at Ethan, waiting. Ethan swallowed, then placed one foot on the first step. The metal creaked under his weight. He moved slowly, one step at a time, the beam of light guiding him downward. Atlas followed right behind him. The temperature dropped slightly as they descended, the air cooler but still protected from the wind. At the bottom, Ethan stepped onto solid ground. He raised the flashlight and froze. It was a bunker, an old one, Cold War era, if he had to guess. Concrete walls, reinforced, with metal supports. Shelving units lined one side, most of them empty, but a few still holding rusted tools, old containers, remnants of something long forgotten. A table sat in the center, dust-covered but whole. Ethan turned slowly, taking it all in. "This place," he whispered. Atlas moved ahead, sniffing along the edges, investigating every corner. Ethan followed the beam of light, revealing more with each step. An old generator, broken but recognizable. Water tanks. Empty, or maybe not. He tapped one lightly, a hollow echo still intact. Ethan's breathing slowed. His mind shifted. This wasn't just shelter. Oh, this was opportunity. He looked around again. this time with different eyes. Not as something abandoned, but as something waiting, just like the land. He let out a quiet breath. "Atlas," he said softly. The dog turned toward him. Ethan nodded once, a faint spark lighting behind his tired eyes. "I think you just found us a way to survive." Atlas's tail moved once, slow, certain. Above them, the wind swept across the land. But down here, it was still. For the first time since he had arrived, Ethan didn't feel exposed, didn't feel like he was barely holding on. He felt grounded, and it was because of the dog, standing beside him. Ethan reached down, resting his hand on Atlas's head. "Good boy," he said quietly. The words carried more weight than anything he had said since leaving his home, because for the first time, they had something. Not much. Not yet. But enough. Enough to change everything. Ethan stood in the center of the bunker, the beam of his flashlight steady now, no longer shaking in his hand. For the first time since he had been forced out of his home, his mind wasn't spiraling. It was working, measuring, planning. He turned slowly, taking in every corner again. But this time, he wasn't just seeing what was there. He was seeing what it could become. "Walls are solid," he muttered. "No major cracks. Structures holding." His voice echoed faintly in the enclosed space. Atlas moved along the perimeter, nose close to the ground, checking every inch with quiet precision. Ethan stepped toward the old generator. He crouched beside it, brushing away a layer of dust with his sleeve. Probably hasn't run in, 40 years? He leaned closer, inspecting the casing. Rust, but not eaten through. Connections, still in place. He exhaled slowly. "Maybe," he said. "Just maybe." Hope was small, fragile, but real. He stood and moved to the water tanks again, knocking lightly on the metal, still sealed. "Even if it's empty," he said, "we can use it." His thoughts were coming faster now, faster than they had in a long time. Not memories, not fear, solutions. Atlas returned to his side, looking up at him. Ethan nodded. "We stay down here tonight," he said. "Cabin won't hold if the wind picks up again." Atlas didn't hesitate. Decision made. Grand, Ethan climbed back up the steps, the cold air hitting him as soon as he reached the surface. The sky had shifted again. Clouds were rolling in thick and heavy, the kind that swallowed light and brought something worse with them. He scanned the horizon. Snow coming fast. "Yeah," he murmured. "We're not sleeping up here." He moved quickly now, grabbing what little he had from the truck. Blankets, a small bag of supplies, the last of his food. Every trip felt heavier, not because of the weight, because of the urgency. The wind picked up, biting at his face, pushing against him like it wanted him gone. Ethan didn't stop. Atlas stayed close, watching the tree line. Then Ethan, then back again, always aware, always ready. By the time they brought everything down into the bunker, the first snow had started to fall. Light at first, then thicker, faster. Ethan pulled the hatch closed above them, sealing off the outside world. The sound changed instantly. Muted, distant, and the storm became something far away. Down here, it was quiet. Still, Ethan stood there for a moment, breathing in the difference. "No wind," he said quietly. "No immediate danger. No exposure." He set the flashlight on the table, angling it upward so it lit the space. The bunker came alive in soft, dim light. Not warm, but stable. He spread out the blankets near one wall, creating a makeshift resting spot. Atlas circled once, then lay down, still alert, but calmer than before. Ethan sat beside him, letting his back rest against the cold concrete. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't think, just existed. The silence didn't feel threatening. It felt earned. "You did this," Ethan said quietly, glancing at Atlas. The dog's ear twitched slightly. Ethan let out a slow breath. Found it. Kept digging. He shook his head faintly. "Better instincts than most men I served with." Atlas's tail thumped once against the ground. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. But the quiet didn't last. It never did. A sound echoed faintly from above. Not the wind. Something heavier. A shift. Ethan's body tensed instantly. His head tilted slightly. Listening. Another sound. A low creak. Wood. The cabin. Ethan stood slowly, eyes lifting toward the ceiling as if he could see through it. "Storm's hitting harder," he said. Atlas was already on his feet. Then a sharp crack. Loud. Final. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he whispered. "That's not good." A rumble followed, distant, but unmistakable. The kind that came from something giving way. Ethan didn't move, didn't rush. He just stood there, listening, and every instinct telling him exactly what had happened. The cabin. It wasn't built to last. Not like this. Not through a storm like that. He exhaled slowly. "Good call," he said quietly to Atlas. If they had stayed up there, he didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Atlas stepped closer, pressing lightly against his leg. Ethan reached down, resting his hand on the dog's neck. "Yeah," he said. "We're all right." They stood there for a few seconds longer, listening. But the sounds above faded into the storm again. Nothing else collapsed. Nothing else broke. Just the wind. Just the snow. Ethan sat back down. Slower this time. The adrenaline drained out of him in waves. Not panic, not fear. Just the realization. They had made the right move. For once, he leaned back against the wall again, letting his head rest. "I used to plan for things like this," he said quietly. "Used to think 10 steps ahead." His eyes drifted across the bunker. Somewhere along the way, I stopped. Atlas lay down beside him again. Close. Solid. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Guess I needed a reminder. The dog didn't respond. He didn't need to. Time passed. Hard to tell how much. The storm raged above them. But down here, it was contained. Distant. Ethan eventually shifted, pushing himself upright again. "All right," he said. "We don't just sit here." His voice was firmer now. Different. He grabbed the flashlight and began moving through the bunker again. This time, with purpose. Inventory, assessment, planning. He checked the shelves, sorted what little remained. Tools. Rusted, but usable. Old wiring, scrap metal. Every piece mattered now. Atlas followed him, staying close, but giving him space when needed. Ethan paused at the generator again. He crouched down, studying it more carefully this time. "If I can get this running," he trailed off. "Light, heat, power. Not comfort, but control." He nodded to himself, step by step. He stood again, scanning the room one more time. This place wasn't finished. Not even close. But it was something he could build on. Something he could shape. For the first time since everything had been taken from him, he wasn't just reacting. He was creating. Ethan looked down at Atlas. The dog met his gaze. No doubt. No hesitation. Ethan gave a small, firm nod. "We're not done," he said. The storm howled above them. The land remained harsh, unforgiving. But down here, something had changed. Not safety. Not yet. But direction. And that was enough to keep going. The storm lasted through the night. Ethan didn't sleep much. Not because of fear this time, but because his mind wouldn't slow down. Every creak of the bunker, every distant thud of wind against the land above, every flicker of thought about what needed to be done next, it all kept him awake. But it wasn't chaos. It was structure, the kind he hadn't felt in years. When morning finally came, it announced itself quietly, just a faint shift in the light, seeping down through the seams of the hatch. Ethan sat up slowly, rubbing his hands together. Atlas was already awake. "Of course. All right," Ethan said, voice low but steady. "Let's see what we've got left up there." He climbed the metal steps, pushing the hatch open with effort. The snow spilled slightly inward as the seal broke. Cold air rushed down, but it wasn't the violent cold from before. The storm had passed. What remained was silence. Ethan stepped out onto the surface and stopped. The cabin was gone. Not completely, but close enough. Half of it had collapsed inward. The roof caved in, one wall leaning at an angle like it was too tired to keep standing. The rest was buried under snow. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. Not shock, not anger, just acknowledgement. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That tracks." Atlas stepped out beside him, scanning the area, then looking back at Ethan. Ethan nodded once. "We're not going back in there." He moved forward carefully, brushing snow aside where he could, checking if anything could be salvaged. Not much. A few boards, some nails, and a bent piece of metal that might still be useful. He gathered what he could, stacking it near the bunker entrance. Every piece mattered now. Every scrap. Atlas moved farther out, circling wider this time, covering more ground. Ethan kept an eye on him. The land felt different now. Not just empty, occupied. Not by people, but by presence. Tracks in the snow confirmed it. Deer, small animals, and something larger. Ethan crouched, examining one of the deeper prints. "Wolf. Recent?" He exhaled slowly. "All right," he muttered. "We're sharing the neighborhood." Atlas returned shortly after, pacing once, before settling near Ethan again. Ethan stood, brushing snow off his hands. "Food's next," he said. "Then water. Then we figure out how to make that bunker livable." He glanced at the horizon. Oh, the mountains stretched endlessly. No roads, no signs, no help. Just distance and time. He turned back toward the bunker, then froze. A sound. Not wind, not an animal. A low rumble. Engine. Ethan's body shifted instantly, his posture tightening. Atlas stiffened beside him, ears forward. The sound grew louder, coming from beyond the ridge to the east. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "No one's supposed to be out here," he said under his breath. The engine crested the hill moments later. An old truck, beaten but running. It moved slowly, tires crunching through the snow, heading straight toward the cabin's remains. Ethan didn't wave, didn't call out. He just stood there, watching, ready. The truck came to a stop about 30 yards away. The engine idled for a moment, then shut off. Silence returned. The driver's door opened. An older man stepped out. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Heavy coat, work boots, face weathered by years, not just age. He took a few steps forward, eyes scanning the collapsed cabin, then shifting to Ethan, then to Atlas. He stopped. Not too close, not too far. Smart. Ethan respected that. They stood like that for a moment. Two men measuring each other without words. Finally, the man spoke. Didn't think anyone was still trying to live out here. His voice was calm, not curious, not judgmental, just stating a fact. Ethan didn't answer right away, then didn't think anyone would come looking. The man gave a faint nod. Name's Caleb. Ethan hesitated. Then Ethan? Caleb glanced toward the bunker entrance. Then back at Ethan. You find something under there? Ethan's eyes sharpened slightly. How do you know about it? Caleb shrugged. Used to be a few of those around. Cold War builds. Most people never knew where they were. He gestured toward the collapsed cabin. That place wasn't much. But it wasn't the real shelter, either. Ethan studied him. You've been out here before? Caleb nodded once. Years ago, helped build a few structures around these parts. This land? He paused, looking around. People called it dead because they didn't know how to use it. Ethan said nothing. Caleb looked back at him more directly now. You planning to stay? The question hung in the air. Simple but heavy. Ethan glanced at the bunker, then at Atlas, then back at Caleb. Yeah, he said. I am. Caleb didn't react immediately. Then he nodded again. Good. Ethan frowned slightly. Good. Caleb took a few steps closer now. Still careful. Still respectful of distance. Because this place doesn't kill people, he said. It just waits for them to give up. Ethan held his gaze. I'm not giving up. Caleb's eyes shifted briefly to Atlas. The dog stood still, watching him closely. Then back to Ethan. I can see that. A small pause. Then Caleb added, not many out here could survive the first night. Ethan glanced at the collapsed cabin again. Didn't stay in it? Caleb's brow lifted slightly. No. Ethan jerked his head toward the bunker. Down there. Caleb looked at the hatch, then back at Ethan. A slow, knowing smile crossed his face. Well, he said, that explains it. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was understanding. Caleb shifted his weight slightly. You're going to need help. Ethan didn't respond immediately. His instincts pushed back. Independence, control. Trust no one. But Atlas moved. Just a step. Just enough to stand slightly in front of Ethan. Then relax. No growl, no tension, just acceptance. Ethan noticed, and that mattered. He looked back at Caleb. What kind of help? Caleb nodded toward the truck. Tools, materials, knowledge. He paused. And someone who's made mistakes. Out here before. Ethan let out a slow breath. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was something else. He studied Caleb for another long moment, then gave a small nod. All right, he said. We'll talk. Caleb smiled faintly. Figured you might. Atlas's tail moved once, slow, certain, and for the first time since Ethan had set foot on that land, it didn't feel like he was completely alone anymore. The feeling didn't last. Not fully, but it stayed long enough to matter. Caleb didn't leave right away. He walked the perimeter with Ethan, slow and steady, boots crunching through the snow as he pointed out things Ethan hadn't noticed yet. Wind patterns, drainage paths, where the ground held firm and where it didn't. This place looks empty, Caleb said, gesturing across the frozen stretch. But it's not. It's layered. You just got to read it, right? Ethan listened. Really listened. Not like before. Not distracted. Not guarded. Focused. Atlas stayed close, occasionally moving ahead, then circling back. Always aware. of both men. Caleb noticed. "That dog of yours," he said, nodding toward Atlas. "He's not just tagging along." Ethan glanced down at Atlas. "No," he said quietly. "He's not." Caleb gave a faint nod. "Good," he said. "Out here, instincts matter more than anything else." They worked through the day, clearing debris, reinforcing the bunker entrance. Caleb pulled tools from his truck. Old, worn, but reliable. Ethan used them like muscle memory had never left. Hammer, measure, adjust. Every movement came back piece by piece. Not perfectly, but enough. By late afternoon, the entrance to the bunker was more secure. A temporary cover, better insulation, less exposure. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Ethan stood back, breathing slowly, looking at what they had done. "Didn't think I'd be building again," he said. Caleb shrugged. "Most men don't think about a lot of things until they have to." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Atlas sat nearby, watching them both. Calm, but alert. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the snow. Caleb wiped his hands on his jacket. "I'll head back before dark," he said. "Road gets tricky when the light's gone." Ethan nodded. "You coming back?" Caleb looked at him for a moment. Then, "If you're still here," Ethan didn't hesitate. "I will be." Caleb gave a small approving nod. "Then I will too." He turned toward his truck, pausing briefly as Atlas approached him. The dog stood still, studying him. Caleb crouched slightly, extending a hand, not forcing, just offering. Atlas stepped forward, sniffed, then allowed the contact. A quiet moment, simple, but meaningful. Caleb stood again. "Well, he trusts slow," he said. Ethan nodded. "So do I." Caleb climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling to life. "See you tomorrow, Ethan." Ethan gave a small nod. "Yeah." The truck pulled away, disappearing over the ridge the way it came. Silence returned, but not the same silence as before. This one had weight, structure. Ethan turned back toward the bunker. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's keep moving." Atlas followed. The evening passed with small tasks, organizing, rechecking, planning the next steps. By the time night settled in again, Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Not comfort, but control. He sat inside the bunker, the flashlight resting nearby, its beam dimmer now, but still holding. Atlas lay beside him, close present. Ethan leaned back against the wall, exhaling slowly. "We might actually make this work," he said. Atlas's tail tapped lightly. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Then, a sound. Not wind. Not distant. Close. Engine. Ethan's eyes snapped open. Atlas was already up. Alert. Tense. Ethan stood immediately, grabbing the flashlight. "That's not Caleb," he muttered. The sound came from the opposite direction this time. Faster. Less cautious. Ethan moved toward the steps, Atlas right behind him. He pushed the hatch open, just enough to look out. Headlights cut through the growing dark. 2 vehicles, SUVs clean. Out of place. They didn't belong here. Ethan's jaw tightened. "They found me." The vehicles stopped near the edge of the property. Doors opened. 3 figures stepped out. Ethan didn't need the light to recognize them. His chest tightened. And his son, his daughter, and a man in a suit. Atlas let out a low growl. Ethan's hand rested on his neck. "Easy," he whispered. But his own pulse had already changed. The past had caught up, and it didn't come quietly. Ethan stepped out fully now, standing in the open, the cold biting at him, but barely registering. The three figures approached slowly, carefully, like they were walking into something they didn't fully understand. His daughter spoke first. "Dad?" The word felt wrong in the air. Ethan didn't respond, didn't move. His son stepped forward. "We've been looking for you." Ethan's voice came out calm, flat. "I doubt that." The man in the suit adjusted his coat. "We're not here to argue," he said. "We're here to resolve a legal matter." Ethan's eyes shifted to him. "Of course you are." Atlas stepped slightly in front of Ethan, now protective. The lawyer glanced down at the dog, then back at Ethan. "You've been declared unstable," he said carefully, "given recent behavior and your medical history." Ethan's gaze hardened. What?" the man continued. "Your children are requesting full control of your remaining assets, including this property." Ethan let out a quiet breath. Not surprise, not anger, just confirmation. "They didn't just take the house," he said slowly. "They're trying to take everything." His son stepped forward again. "Dad, you don't understand. This land is valuable now. We can sell it. Set you up somewhere safe." "Safe?" Ethan cut in. The word carried weight. Heavy. Sharp. "You mean somewhere I don't get in the way?" Silence fell. His daughter looked away, but the lawyer stepped forward slightly. "We can do this the easy way," he said. Atlas growled louder this time. A warning clear. The man stopped. Ethan placed a hand on Atlas again, but he didn't step back, didn't retreat. "You already made your choice, Robert," Ethan said quietly. Back at the house, his son's expression tightened. "That was different." Ethan shook his head. "No," he said. "It wasn't." The wind picked up slightly, carrying the cold across the open land. But Ethan didn't feel it. He felt something else now, clarity. "I'm not signing anything," he said. The lawyer sighed. "Then we proceed legally." Ethan nodded once. "Then you do that." His daughter's voice cracked slightly. "Dad, please." Ethan looked at her, really looked. For the first time since they arrived. There was something there. Regret, maybe. But it came too late. "You erased me once," he said softly. "I'm not letting you do it again." Silence. Heavy. Final. The lawyer nodded stiffly. "Then we'll be in touch." They turned, walked back to their vehicles. Engines started. Headlights cut through the dark once more. Then, they were gone. Just like that. But something had changed. The land didn't feel empty anymore. It felt claimed. Ethan stood there for a long moment. Atlas pressed lightly against his side. Ethan exhaled slowly. "They're not done," he said. Atlas didn't move. Didn't need to. Ethan looked out across the dark land, then back toward the bunker, then down at the dog beside him. "No," he said quietly. "Neither are we." The words stayed in the air long after the headlights disappeared. Ethan didn't move and didn't go back inside. He stood there staring into the dark where his children had just been, the silence pressing in around him like something waiting. Atlas stayed close, not tense, not restless, just present, like he understood this moment mattered. Ethan finally exhaled, slow and controlled. "They're coming back," he said. "Not tonight. Not like that. But they will." Atlas's ears shifted slightly. Ethan nodded to himself. "Which means we don't get comfortable." He turned and headed toward the bunker. Atlas followed. The hatch closed behind them, with a dull, final sound. Inside, the quiet returned. But it wasn't the same as before. Before, the silence had been survival. Now it carried something else. Pressure. Ethan set the flashlight down and began moving again. Checking. Rechecking. He reinforced what Caleb had helped him build earlier. Added extra weight to the hatch. Moved tools closer to reach. Mapped the space in his head again. Every corner, every angle. Atlas watched him, tracking each movement. "You feel it too, don't you?" Ethan said quietly. Atlas didn't respond, but he didn't need to. Ethan stopped, resting his hands briefly on the table. "They're not the only ones out there. The wolf tracks, the movement the night before. The land wasn't empty. It never had been. And now, neither was his past." Ethan rubbed his face slowly. "All right," he murmured, "one thing at a time." Time passed, hard to measure. The bunker held steady. The wind outside began to rise again. Not as violent as the night before, but enough. Ethan finally sat down back against the wall. Atlas settled beside him. But for a moment, everything was still. Ethan's eyes grew heavy. Not from peace, from exhaustion, the kind that didn't ask permission. He let his head tilt back slightly, just for a second. Just to rest. A sound faint above. Ethan's eyes opened instantly. Atlas was already up. A low growl vibrated from his chest. Ethan stood slow, controlled, listening. Another sound. A scrape. Not the wind. Closer. Deliberate. Ethan's jaw tightened. "They came back," he whispered. Atlas moved toward the base of the stairs, positioning himself between Ethan and the hatch. Protective. Ready. Ethan grabbed the piece of metal pipe he had set aside earlier. Not a weapon, but enough. He moved toward the steps. Each movement quiet, measured. The sound above shifted again. Footsteps. Then a sudden sharp thud. But the hatch rattled. Ethan froze. Atlas barked once. Loud. Warning. Silence followed. Heavy. Then nothing. No voices. No movement. Just the wind again. Ethan didn't move. Didn't breathe fully. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Then more. Atlas's posture slowly shifted. But he didn't relax completely. Ethan exhaled slowly. "That wasn't them," he said quietly. "Too quiet. Too fast. Too wrong." He stepped back down. Waited. Listened. Nothing. Eventually, the tension eased just enough for him to lower the pipe. "Animals," he said. Testing. Atlas huffed softly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." But something in his chest stayed tight. He didn't sit back down. Didn't close his eyes again. He stayed alert. Watching. Waiting. Hours passed. Then the storm hit. Not like before. Worse. The wind howled above them, but louder than anything they had heard yet. Snow slammed against the ground, against the collapsed cabin, against everything. The bunker held, but barely. The sound was overwhelming, relentless. Ethan braced himself against the wall as the pressure shifted around them. "Stay down," he said to Atlas. The dog didn't move from his side. Then a sudden crack, not above, to the side. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound. The wall. A faint line had formed along one section. Not large, but enough. Damn it. Another crack. Louder. Ethan moved quickly, grabbing what he could. Tools. Boards. Anything. "We reinforce it," he said. Atlas followed, staying close, but out of the way. Ethan pressed a board against the weakening section, bracing it with metal supports. His hands moved fast, precise. Years of training returned under pressure. Another crack echoed. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ethan didn't stop. "Hold," he muttered. "Just hold." The storm outside roared, like it wanted in. The wall shifted again. Ethan slammed another support into place, forcing it tight. "Come on!" Then a sudden collapse. Not the wall above. Snow and debris shifted hard against the bunker's outer structure, sending a shock through the room. Ethan stumbled, catching himself against the table. Atlas barked sharply. Then silence. Not full silence, but the kind that comes after something almost breaks. Ethan stood still, listening. Nothing moved. The wall held. The bunker held. He let out a slow breath. "We're still here," he said. Atlas stepped closer, pressing against him. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." But then a different sound outside. Faint, distant. Ethan frowned. "That's not the storm." He moved toward the steps again, slower this time. "Careful." Atlas stayed tight at his side. Ethan pushed the hatch open slightly. Cold air rushed in. The storm had slowed. Not stopped, but eased. He looked out and saw it. A shape in the snow, moving, unsteady, low to the ground. Ethan's eyes narrowed. An injured wolf. It staggered a few steps, then collapsed. Ethan's grip tightened. Atlas stepped forward slightly. Alert, but not aggressive. Ethan watched. The animal wasn't attacking. It wasn't hunting. It was dying. Ethan exhaled slowly. "This place," he murmured. "Survival for everything or nothing." He looked down at Atlas. The dog met his gaze. Ethan nodded once, but then looked back out at the broken land around them. The storm had taken its shot. The land had tested him. His past had found him. And still, he was standing barely, but standing. And Atlas was still beside him, no matter what came next. The wolf didn't move again. Snow gathered slowly across its back, soft at first, then heavier, covering what little warmth it had left. Ethan stood at the edge of the hatch, watching, not with fear, not with anger, just understanding. "This place doesn't forgive mistakes," he said quietly. Atlas stood beside him, still silent. Ethan finally stepped back and pulled the hatch closed. The metal sealed with a dull sound. Inside, the bunker felt different again. Not just shelter, responsibility. He stood there for a moment, letting that settle. Then he turned. "All right," he said. We don't waste what we've got." The next days blurred together. Not in chaos. In rhythm. Ethan woke with the light, worked until the light faded, rested just enough to keep moving. Then did it again. Atlas stayed with him through all of it. Every step. Every task. They started with the bunker. Ethan reinforced the weak wall completely, layering boards and metal until it held firm against pressure. He cleared out debris, reorganized the space, built a proper sleeping area using what remained of the cabin. Small improvements, but meaningful. Then came water. Ethan found a narrow stream not far beyond the ridge, partially frozen, but still moving beneath the ice. Atlas led him there the first time, not by chance, by instinct. Ethan knelt beside it, breaking through the surface carefully. "Good find," he said. Atlas watched. Ethan filled what containers he had, carrying them back slowly, step by step. It took time. Everything did. Food was harder. They rationed what little remained. Ethan, set simple traps, checked them daily. Some worked, some didn't. Atlas helped track movement, alerting Ethan when something passed nearby. Once he stood still for nearly 10 minutes, staring into a patch of trees. Ethan trusted that and waited. Moments later, a small deer moved through the clearing. Ethan didn't hesitate. Survival didn't leave room for doubt. He did what needed to be done. Later, he sat beside the fire inside the bunker. Quiet, respectful, not wasted, he said. Atlas lay beside him. Close, always close. Days turned into weeks. The land changed slowly. Snow settled deeper, then began to thin. The air shifted. It was still cold, but less hostile. Ethan worked on the generator next. Carefully, piece by piece, he cleaned connections, replaced what he could, improvised what he couldn't. Caleb returned regularly. Not every day, but often enough. Each time he brought something. Wires, fuel, parts that looked useless, until Ethan found a way to use them. "You're building something real here," Caleb said one afternoon, standing inside the bunker. Ethan didn't look up from his work, just making it through. Caleb shook his head. "No," he said. "You're doing more than that." Ethan didn't respond, but the words stayed. The generator coughed the first time. Ethan tried to start it. A rough, broken sound. Then, silence. He adjusted. Tried again. Another cough. Stronger. Atlas stood nearby, watching. Ethan wiped his hands. "One more time," he said. He pulled. The engine sputtered, then caught. A low hum filled the bunker. Not loud, not steady, but alive. Ethan froze for a second, then let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "There it is," he said quietly. Light came next. Dim, flickering, but real. Atlas's ears lifted slightly. Ethan looked around the bunker, now lit in a soft, uneven glow. "It works," he said. "Not perfect, but enough. More than enough." From there, everything changed. He added insulation, improved airflow, expanded storage. The bunker grew from a place to hide into a place to live. And then something more. Caleb noticed it first. "You ever think about making space for more than just you?" he asked. Ethan paused. "What do you mean?" Caleb gestured around. "You've got structure. Well, you've got water, heat, protection." He looked at Ethan. "There are men out there who don't have any of that." Ethan didn't answer immediately. His mind shifted not to fear, not to doubt, to memory. Faces, voices, men who never found their way back. Men who didn't make it. Men who did, but had nowhere to go. Atlas moved slightly, resting his head against Ethan's leg. Ethan looked down at him, then back at the bunker, then at Caleb. "It's not ready," he said. Caleb nodded. "It doesn't have to be perfect." Ethan exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "But it has to hold." Caleb gave a small smile. "That part," he said, "you've already figured out." Time passed. More work. More changes. The bunker expanded outward. Small additions at first, then larger. Ethan built with purpose now. Not just survival. Function. Structure. Meaning. Atlas remained at the center of it all. He guarded, tracked, warned, and once saved. It happened fast. A low growl, a sudden movement from the tree line. A wolf larger than the one from before charged too close. Ethan didn't see it in time, but Atlas did. He moved first, intercepted, took the hit. Ethan reacted immediately, driving the animal back. It retreated quickly, but Atlas didn't rise right away. Ethan dropped to his knees beside him. Hey, hey. Atlas's breathing was steady, but his leg injured. Ethan's hands moved fast, checking, stabilizing. You're all right, he said. You're all right. Atlas looked at him, calm, trusting. Ethan swallowed hard. Stay with me, he said. He carried him back to the bunker carefully, every step deliberate. Inside, he worked through the night. But a cleaning, binding, watching, waiting. Atlas didn't leave his side, and Ethan didn't leave his. By morning, the dog was still breathing. Still there. Ethan sat beside him, exhausted, eyes heavy, but alert. You don't get to leave, he said quietly. Atlas's tail moved once. Weak. But there. Ethan nodded. Good. He leaned back against the wall. The bunker around him. The work he had built. The place that had started as nothing. Now it meant something, not just to him, but because of him. Ethan looked around slowly. Then down at Atlas. Then toward the entrance. The land outside remained harsh, unforgiving, but it no longer felt like it was trying to erase him. It felt like something else, a test. And for the first time, Ethan wasn't just surviving it, he was shaping it. The days no longer blurred the way they used to. They carried weight now. Purpose. Every beam he reinforced, every wire he connected, every step he took across the land. It all meant something. Not just to stay alive, but to build. Atlas healed slowly. The limp stayed for a while, but the strength in him never left. If anything, it sharpened. He moved more carefully now, more aware. Ethan noticed. You're thinking more, he said one morning, watching Atlas pause, before stepping onto uneven ground. Atlas looked back at him. Ethan nodded. Good. Caleb came less frequently now, not because he stopped caring, because he didn't need to. Ethan had found his rhythm, and the land had started to respond. Small signs at first. Tracks returning, water flowing more freely as the snow melted. Even the air felt different. Less like resistance, more like acceptance. Then, one afternoon, a sound. Not wind, not wildlife. Footsteps. Ethan straightened instantly. Atlas was already alert. The direction was different. This time. Not the road, not the ridge. Closer. Ethan stepped out of the bunker, scanning the trees. Show yourself, he said. Silence. Then, movement. A figure stepped out slowly from behind a cluster of trees. Small, not a threat. Ethan's eyes narrowed. A girl, 16 maybe, thin jacket, face pale from the cold, but her eyes focused, locked on him. Atlas didn't growl, didn't move forward. He just watched carefully. The girl stopped a few yards away. She looked at Ethan like she wasn't sure what to say. Then, Grandpa. The word hit harder than anything that had come before. Ethan didn't respond and didn't move. He just stood there. The girl took another step forward. It's me, she said. Lily. Ethan's chest tightened. He searched her face and found it familiar. Not in features alone, in something deeper. Memory. You shouldn't be out here, he said quietly. Lily shook her head. I had to find you. Atlas stepped slightly to the side, giving her a clearer path. Ethan noticed, always noticing. How did you get here? He asked. I followed the road, then walked. You walked? She nodded. Ethan exhaled slowly. That's not safe. I know. Her voice didn't shake, but neither is what they did. Silence settled between them. Heavy. Real. Ethan looked at her more closely now, not just as a stranger, but as someone connected to everything he had lost. What do you want, Lily? He asked when her eyes filled. But she didn't look away. I want the truth. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Then you'll get it from me. Her expression tightened. I already know part of it, she said. That made him pause. What part? Lily stepped closer. They said you left. They said that you signed everything over and just disappeared. Ethan's jaw set. And you believe that? I did, she said after a beat. Until I saw the papers. Ethan's eyes shifted. Slightly. What papers? The ones they didn't think I'd understand, she said. Power of attorney, transfer of assets. Her voice hardened. Your signature didn't even look right. Ethan felt something shift inside him. Not anger. Not yet. Something deeper. Lily took another step forward. They lied, she said. To me. To everyone. Atlas moved closer to Ethan's side again. Protective, but not aggressive. Lily noticed. He trusts you, she said softly. Ethan didn't respond. He doesn't trust them, she added. That landed. Ethan looked at Atlas, then back at her. Why are you here? He asked again. Lily swallowed. Because I didn't want you to disappear, she said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Ethan turned slightly, looking out across the land. This place isn't for you, he said. I didn't come for the place. He glanced back at her. I came for you. Silence. Long. Uncomfortable. Real. Ethan exhaled slowly. You shouldn't have, he said. Maybe, she replied. But I did. Atlas stepped forward then, not toward Ethan, toward her. Slow, measured. Lily held still. Let him approach. Sniffed her hand. Paused. Then accepted. Ethan watched that closely. Very closely. That means something, Lily said. Ethan nodded faintly. Yeah, he said. It does. She looked around the land. The bunker entrance. The work. You built all this. Ethan hesitated. We did. He rested a hand briefly on Atlas. Lily nodded. It's not nothing, she said. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. They're coming back, she said suddenly. Ethan's expression shifted. I know. I know. No, she said. Soon. And with more than just a lawyer. That sharpened everything. What do you mean? They think you're unstable, she said. They're going to try to prove it. Take everything legally. Ethan's gaze hardened. They already tried. They're not done, she said. Ethan looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't guessing. And she knew. How do you know all this? He asked. I heard them, she said. They don't think you'll last out here. Ethan let out a quiet breath. They're wrong. Lily nodded. I know. Another pause. Then she said it softly but clearly. They didn't just take your house. Ethan's eyes met hers. They erased you. The words hit deeper than anything before. Not loud, not explosive, just true. Ethan looked away out across the land again, the place he had rebuilt himself in. Piece by piece. They tried, he said quietly. Lily stepped closer. But you're still here. Atlas pressed lightly against Ethan's side. Ethan rested his hand on him. Grounding. Steady. He nodded once. Yeah, he said, then looked back at her. Still here, and for the first time, he didn't feel like something forgotten. He felt like something found again. In the weeks that followed, Lily gave Ethan copies of the papers she had found. With Caleb beside him, Ethan challenged the attempt to declare him incapable, and made it clear that the power of attorney had never been permission to erase his life. The fight was not quick, but the land remained his, and Robert and his sister were forced to step back. For Ethan, that mattered less than one simple truth. This time, he had chosen to stand for himself. The wind moved softer now, not gone, but changed. Months passed. Ethan stood at the edge of the ridge, looking out over the land that had once been called dead. It didn't look dead anymore. Not to him. Below, the bunker had grown. No longer hidden. No longer just survival. Wooden extensions stretched outward, reinforced with steel and salvaged materials. A small greenhouse stood near the stream, covered in clear panels Caleb had brought months ago. Smoke rose steadily from a vent pipe. Lily stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed against the morning chill. You really built all of this? She asked again. Ethan nodded slightly. Not all at once. Atlas lay nearby. Older now, his movements slower, but his eyes still sharp, still watching everything. Lily glanced at him. He never leaves your side. Ethan looked down at the dog. He's the reason I'm still standing. Atlas's tail moved once, slow, steady. Time had passed. More than Ethan had expected. More than he had planned for. What started as a place to survive had become something else entirely. They didn't advertise it. Didn't name it at first, but word spread. It always did. One man showed up first, then another, then a third. All different. All different. All the same. Veterans lost, discarded, trying to figure out where they still belonged. Ethan didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. He saw it in the way they stood, the way they looked at the land, the way they looked at him, like he understood something they couldn't explain. You can stay, Ethan had said the first time. Simple. No conditions, no promises. Just a place. They stayed. They worked. They built together. Caleb helped expand the structures. Lily helped organize supplies, track inventory, bring order where there had once been only instinct. And Atlas remained the center. He greeted every newcomer the same way. Careful, measured, deciding. Ethan trusted that more than anything else. Years passed. Not fast, but steady. The land changed, and so did what stood on it. What had once been called dead land now had a name, Atlas Haven. No one argued it. It just fit. Ethan stood now at the edge of it, watching as two men worked near the greenhouse, repairing a panel. Another was hauling water from the stream. Lily moved between them, giving instructions, her voice calm, confident. Ethan let out a slow breath. This wasn't the plan, he said quietly. Caleb, standing beside him, chuckled softly. Most good things aren't. Ethan glanced at him. You still think this place doesn't kill people? Caleb shook his head. No, he said. I think it shows them who they really are. Ethan nodded slowly. Below, Atlas shifted, pushing himself up with effort, then walking toward Ethan. Slower now, but determined. Ethan crouched slightly as the dog reached him. Hey, he said softly. Atlas leaned into him, solid, familiar. Ethan rested his forehead briefly against the dog's head. You did good, he whispered. Atlas huffed lightly. Lily approached, stopping just a few steps away. They're here, she said. Ethan straightened. Who? Lily hesitated. Your son. Your daughter. Caleb glanced at Ethan. Your call, he said. Ethan looked out across the land again, then down at Atlas, and then back toward Lily. Let them come, he said. They arrived differently this time. No SUVs, no lawyer, no distance. Just two people walking across the land. Slower, uncertain. Ethan stood waiting. Atlas beside him. Lily slightly behind. Caleb off to the side. They stopped a few yards away. His son spoke first. We didn't understand. Ethan didn't respond. His daughter's voice followed. We thought we were helping. Ethan's gaze stayed steady. You were helping yourselves. Silence. His son nodded. Yeah, he said. We were. That was new. Ethan noticed. His daughter stepped forward slightly. We heard about this place, she said. What you built? Ethan glanced around briefly, then back at them. You mean, what you couldn't take? The words weren't harsh, just true. They didn't argue, and didn't deny it. We can't fix what we did, his son said. Ethan nodded once. No, he said. You can't. Another silence. Then his daughter asked quietly, Is there anything we can do? Ethan looked at them long, carefully. Not as enemies, not as family, just people. Then he stepped slightly to the side, revealing the land behind him, the work, the people, the life. You can see it, he said. They looked, really looked, for the first time. This isn't mine anymore, Ethan continued. Not the way you think. His son frowned slightly. What do you mean? Ethan glanced at Atlas, then at Lily, then at the others working below. It belongs to everyone who needed a place when there wasn't one. His daughter's eyes filled. You built a family. Ethan shook his head. No, he said. They did. He rested his hand on Atlas's back. I just stayed. The wind moved through the valley again. Soft. Steady. His son looked at him. Can we come back? Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at Atlas. The dog watched them. Quiet. Observing. Then, no growl. No warning. Just stillness. Acceptance. Ethan nodded once. You can come, he said, a pause. But you don't get to take. They both nodded. We understand. Ethan held their gaze a moment longer, then turned, walking back toward the land he had built. Atlas beside him. Always beside him. The place behind him still held memories. Still held pain. But it no longer defined him. Ahead, there was something else. Something real. Something no one could erase. And as the sun broke across the mountains, casting light over Atlas Haven, Ethan didn't look back because he no longer needed to. He hadn't gotten his old life back. He had built something stronger, something that held, something that healed, something that stayed. And this time, no one could take it away. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt lost, pushed aside, or had to start over from nothing, drop a simple one in the comments. And if you believe loyalty like Atlas's still exists in this world, type loyal so we know you're here with us. Tell me where you're watching from, too. I read every single comment. And if you want more stories like this, stories about strength, survival, and the kind of loyalty that never walks away, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the next story might stay with you even longer.